Thank you for dropping in with me and visiting with me today. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to be working with paper dyeing, but we're going to actually go over on how to preserve your paper dyeing or your paper dyeing liquid. A lot of times you make a big batch and sometimes it goes bad before you have time to actually dye your paper. So one of the things that's easy to do that many people don't realize is actually just preserving the dye. So what we're going to do today is we're going to make up a big batch of red cabbage, and I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to show you how to do some canning methods that are very easy to do. You can do them in your own home. The closest thing you need to special equipment is canning jars, and you know, you can get those at Walmart, many different places. You can actually buy them from Ball. I think that's pretty much it. I'm going to go ahead and start cutting this down. I've got a pot right here that I'm going to be putting it in, and I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I'll come back whenever I have it all cut down, and I'll show you what we're going to do from there. If you have any questions once we're through, just go ahead and post them down in the comments. I'll try to put everything in that I know to put in regarding this. But you know, once again, we're going to do water bath canning. I'll also take you into pressure canning, so that you can actually, if you have a pressure canner, you can use that. And because this is not, you're not preserving this for eating, I'm also going to do pressure cooker canning. So I'll be back in just a few minutes. Okay, I've got the cabbage cut up. The next thing I'm going to do is just to put it in the pot. I'm going to cover it with some water, and I'm going to put it on to boil. You will see the color develop pretty rapidly with purple or red cabbage, whatever you want to call it. As far as cutting it up into different sizes, or what size you need to cut it up, it doesn't really matter. I've never noticed a difference in having big chunks and little chunks. So we're just going to go ahead and get this in the pot and get it started with some water. I'll bring you back when I actually add the water. I've got everything in here. I have basically gotten 2 half-gallon canning jars that are just filled with tap water. That's all that is. I'm going to pour the water in. And it's nothing special, like I said, tap water. I will not be canning in these. Though if you're using a large pressure canner, you can. There's a difference between a pressure canner and a pressure cooker. But we're going to do 3 different methods. They'll be broken up in separate videos so that it doesn't run on forever. Because canning can take forever. Okay, so I'm going to head and get this started. I need a lid. Alrighty, so I've got a lid that just fits tightly. I'm going to go ahead and cover that, put it on the stove, and bring it to a boil. And then I'm just going to watch the color as it develops, to see when I actually want to pull that off the stove and start my preservation. Okay, we're back. And as you can see, it's been on the stove, definitely to a boil. Go ahead and get that uncovered. And just from what's drained off, you can see, perhaps over here, I don't know, maybe still a little light, the color. Can you see that? It doesn't take much to get that lovely color out. Eventually, if you keep boiling this, it will turn to be a very pale purplish, bluish color. And the paper is absolutely gorgeous. So we're going to let this go a little bit longer. I've got some chunks in here that I would like for it to break down and get the dye out of. So far we're doing good. As soon as we get done, I will come back and we'll get to canning. And like I said, we're going to do water bath canning. You'll need canning jars and some type of stock pot with a tight fitting lid. And that's it. Alright, back in a minute. I thought I'd come back on for just a second to kind of show you how the color is, or the cabbage is actually changing color. Can you see how it's just fading out? It's kind of amazing. Let me, remember, this is what you once had. And now you have that. So it just leaches the color out. And as you can see, the color has gotten darker from when you were last on. And I would say in another 5 minutes or so, you're gonna be good. Basically, you're gonna boil it until you just have decided that you've gotten the intensity of the color out. And there is ways to vary the intensity. So we'll go over a little bit of that, but it's coming along just fine. I thought I would go over some of the varieties of jars you might consider using. Canning jars come in many different sizes. Some of the most common ones used for families is your quart jars. This is like 1.5 pints, and this is a pint. Most of my personal canning is done in the pint. They also come in different size mouths, which really for doing this type of canning doesn't matter. So anyway, I would recommend that if you're going to be canning and preserving and want a good batch of your dye bath, to do quite a few papers, you know, maybe 50 papers or so, to at least put it in a quart. That's my recommendation. If you're going to be doing smaller batches, I would recommend the 1.5 pints. Now, if you do large batches at a time and you have a pressure canner, you can do half gallons, but this is usually pretty good, at least for me anyway. As soon as the red cabbage cools off, I will come back. Well, not cools off, but cools down a little bit. I'll come back and I'll show you how I preserve it. And keep in mind, this is not for preserving food. You know, like this is chicken broth, butter beans, potatoes. This is not for that. The type of preserving we're doing today is not recommended for consumption. There's special procedures that you do need to do in order for them, for you to actually eat what you can. And I'm not doing that. I'm not sterilizing my jars. I'm not going to do any of that. So I'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, so when you're going to select your stock pot for canning your dye bath, you need to, number one, you want to make sure that it has a tightly fitting lid. This does have a vent hole in it, but like I said, not for eating. It's good enough. You need one that's deep. Make sure that it is deep enough to put your jars in. And you also want to make sure that it is deep enough to cover your jars by a couple of inches. Also, check to see how many jars you can get in there. In this one, I don't know if you can see very well, but I can get 3 jars So I know that I can can 3/4 or almost a gallon, almost, well, you know, 3/4 of a gallon in this jar. So I'm going to go ahead, this burner is still hot, so I'm going to go ahead and start heating up my liquid. And once again, tap water, that's all it is. To get that baby turned on, and I'm just going to bring it up to a simmer. That's all I'm going to do. While I'm waiting for that, I'm going to go ahead and start getting my liquid into my jars, and I'm also going to get the red cabbage out of the jars. Now, once again, this is not the way you would can food. The way you would can food is you would clean the jars. I have not cleaned these. I've just taken them straight out of the case. Some people, even though it's an old method that, you know, you really don't even have to do anymore, they would boil the lids, just, you know, to sterilize things. Once again, this is not how you can for consumption. Okay, let me get rid of this lid. Okay, the next thing you want to do, just take out your cabbage. So I'm going to work on that. And I do apologize for the roar in the background. I do have a fan going in here because it's a little warm in the kitchen when you're dealing with all this boiling water, as I'm sure most of you actually know. Okay. So I'm making sure that I drain it very well because I want as much of that liquid in there as possible. And you can see that this is, it's actually a little darker on camera than what it is. This is a fairly light purple. So some more of this. Another thing too, I just thought of, is you don't have to get all of the cabbage out. You can go ahead and put it in there, especially if you like the imprints that leaves on your paper. So, I mean, which I do. I do that in my onion dyes. I leave some of the onion peel in there when I can, so that I get some of that neat texture. So anyway, I'm going to put this to the side. Alright, next thing I'm going to get, this is a ladle for canning. You don't have to have a ladle for canning, you could do it with a tablespoon. It would take you a while, but you could. One thing that is helpful is to have a funnel. I'll be right back. Okay. These funnels, they are kind of specialized. They're made to fit in the wide mouth jars, which this is a wide mouth. I showed you the smaller ringed ones. It'll also fit in either one, and it helps things not to be quite so messy. So anyway, and this particular ladle is a canning ladle also. It holds about a cup. And you're just going to fill it with liquid. Bring it right up either to the bottom, if you happen to have one of these funnels, to the bottom of this funnel, Or you can also just bring it up to the very bottom of that ring, and that'll be good enough. Don't want to overfill it, but that's good enough. And you can see how dark and rich this is. I mean, it is a very nice purple. Lovely. See? So anyway, that jar's getting hot. Let's go on to the next one. One of the reasons why you don't want to overfill your jar is this liquid starts boiling, and it can mess up your seal, so that you go to all this hard work and then your seal doesn't take, which is really annoying, trust me. Okay, and I do not know if you can see it. Ouch. I'm going to move this maybe a little closer, but you can see, if I swirl it around, you can see that beautiful, beautiful color. Okay, so let's get to work on our last one. Actually, see if y'all can see that. Oh well, you can't. But anyway, we're done. I'm going to go ahead and put the last lid on this jar, and I didn't think to tell you that. Let me get rid of this. Sorry, I did not think to tell you how to put your lids on. That's kind of important. Screw your lids on too tight, they won't seal. Too loose, they won't seal. It's something that you do kind of need to practice at. But one of the things that to me works, and I do have difficulty screwing lids on any jars, is it needs to be fingertip tight, which basically you put it on and you're not going to crank it down. That's too tight. You're going to put your cap on, your lid, you're going to put your ring on, and you're going to try and screw it on, and then just hold it by your fingertips and turn. That's it. That's as tight as you want it to go. So, once again, it's loose, it's tight, fingertip. Loose, tight, fingertip. Okay, that's it. Now I'm just waiting for the water to get hot. The reason why I'm waiting for the water to get hot is if you have hot jars, which these are hot, you don't want to put them in cold water because of shock. It can cause your jars to break. Just remember, hot water's hot jars, cold water. That's pretty much all that is. I'll be back as soon as I'm able to put these into the stock pot behind me. Okay, I'm going to try and get you as close as I can. As you can see, the water has actually gotten up to a boil, which, yeah, I wasn't paying attention. So anyway, you don't want your jars directly on basically on the burner. So we're just going to throw a dish towel in there, and that will take care of that issue. And we're just going to pump that down there. And then I'm just going to put the jars in there. There's one. Make sure that dish towel is down. There's two. And there's the third one. And as you can see, the water is fairly close to being onto the top. But we're going to have to add a little bit more water to make sure that we're about this far. That's kind of what you can expect to hear later. Till it's at least 1 inch to 2 inches, preferably above the jar lid. I'm also going to turn this up to high. Let it go ahead and get started on the boiling. And I'm going to get some more water. I'm going to pour some hot water in there, and I'll bring you back in just a few minutes. Okay, my water has come back up to a boil. I'm going to go ahead and add this hot water and pour it all over the stove, obviously. That's good. That should be about 2 inches, so we're pretty good there. It's going to come back up to a boil again, and I'm going to put my lid on. And because it does have that little hole there, I'm just going to put that on it. That'll help hold some of it in. And once it comes up to a boil, I'm just going to say, okay, we're going to wait 10-15 minutes, and then I'm just going to turn it off and let it cool down. And that's pretty much it for the actual preserving it. That's going to kill the germs from this, so that you don't get like the wonderful smell of spoilt cabbage when you open the jar. That's pretty much it for this section of it. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to turn off the camera, and I'll be back when things cool down. Okay, it has stopped boiling. I've taken it off of the stove. As you can probably see, it's still fairly hot. Now you need to, one of two things. If you're not a canner and you don't have a set of canning tongs, you just need to let it cool down, just completely. Once it completely cools down, then, or enough where you're not going to burn yourself, then you can just reach in and grab it. Me, I'm a canner. I have canning tongs. If you have canning tongs, make sure you lift them straight up and out. And you may have already heard one of those pop. Sometimes you'll get a few pops before it actually goes down. But this one did seal right here. That one just sealed. The one I just took down actually sealed. Oh, it, no? Okay, all three have sealed. I can see that the little button is down. That was pretty quick. Okay, so now that that is done, pretty much you just let them cool down. You could take the rings off once they're cool. You don't have to store them with their rings. In fact, if you, let me turn you up where you can see me. Okay, that's a little better. You don't have to, like I said, store them with their rings. You can take the rings off as the jars cool. They do get a little looser, so you can literally just touch them and they'll turn off or come off. In humid climates, you actually wouldn't want to store them with the rings because sometimes they'll rust on the jars. And yeah, once they rust on the jars, you pretty much lost the jar. Let's see. I'm going to do something. I'm going to bring out some onion skins that I have dyed. Let me get rid of this. Be back in just a second. These is actually some onion skin. You can see what a beautiful golden color it is. You can see that it wasn't strained. There's still onion peels and all sorts of trash in it. It's murky, yeah. But whenever I need to dye some paper and I don't really feel like going through the process of peeling the onions, boiling them, and sometimes by the time you get that done, you're just tired and you don't want to do it. So canning them, like on a weekend, that's a really good thing to do. If you have or want to get into pressure canning for your family, I would recommend getting a pressure canner. Then you can can big batches of this at one time, and it's just a lot easier. You know, kind of prep a huge amount, can it, and then you're done for 6 months. You don't have to worry about it. But anyway, that is the water bath method of preserving. Let me get back over here. Of preserving your red cabbage. I'll also go over a pressure cooker method, and which most of y'all can do. And those of you that have a pressure canner, I probably don't need to do anything with that because you most likely already know how to can. But you know, if you want to, just leave me a note in the comments and I'll go ahead and do that. I guess that's it. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask me in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them for you. And just make sure, you know, you put this up in a nice dry area. I wouldn't recommend putting them in extreme heat or extreme cold, especially if you're going to store them for a little while. Typically just putting them in the pantry is great. So thank you for dropping in. Thank you for actually getting to the end of the video. If you liked it, go ahead and like my video, subscribe, and if you would, please share because it does help out my channel a lot.